Welcome quilters to another Snippets with Patterns by Jen. This week we are going to be making little placemats using 3.5-inch squares. So let's get started. I have my 3.5-inch squares laid out already, and we are going to use 24 3.5-inch squares for our placemat. And then you will also need a piece of fabric that is 12.5 by 18.5 for the back of your placemat. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. I just used muslin for the back of mine, but it can be a pretty fabric too if you would like. So we have 24 3.5-inch squares. You can lay them out in any pattern or scrappy fashion that you like. And we are going to go ahead and sew these row by row. So I'm going to bring this over. Now I usually like to sew these into pairs like this and bring it over to the machine. I feel like it goes a little bit faster, but I'm going to do it differently so that if you are new to sewing, we don't get too confused. But if you are an experienced quilter, you can go ahead, sew them in pairs or however you like to sew your rows. For the beginner, we're going to just go ahead, stack one on top of the other. And I'm going to take this to the machine. We'll sew them one by one, and then we will come back and press that row, and I will show you then how to pin these. We will just go row by row. We're going to have a placemat in no time. All right, so we're going to sew this first row, and I brought the pile over, and we're just going to sew right sides together at 1/4 of an inch. And you can go ahead and sew these into pairs and then into a row, but I'll just quickly go one at a time with you because sometimes that's easier, especially if you are just starting out, and we want this to be easy and we want this to be a good finish for you. So we'll just go one at a time, and I'm going to press all of these after they're all sewn together so that I get them pressed all the same direction, because then we will go ahead and press the next row the opposite direction, and that way we can pin these, nest these seams up really nicely together, pin them, and get those seams to sew nicely together and have a nice finish. So, all right, so I'm going to go ahead, take this over to the table, and we will cut off those threads, and I'll show you how I press, and then we'll pin. All right, so we are ready to press our row, and we're going to press all of these the same direction, because then we're going to sew the next row and press those the opposite direction so that we can pin these. So I'm going to take this first row, and this is how I press my rows. I'm going to lift one side. I'm going to hit the one seam to set it, come over and press. I'm not pushing down on that fabric at all as I come, so I'm not stretching it. I'm just bringing my iron over to make sure I am not catching any of that fabric. I'm going to press that seam up. We're just going to come over, press all the way down, and now each seam is going that same direction. So now the seams are all going the same direction. And now I'll actually take, so this is my second row. Here's my first, here's my second row. I'm going to rotate it. Now, if you are a beginner, you can do it however you want. You just want to make sure that the seams that you are pressing right now are going the opposite directions of the ones you just pressed with the first row. So how I make sure I do this is, here's my first row. I'm going to rotate it and then press this exact same way that I did before, but because I've rotated it, when I'm done and I flip it back, it's going to have the seams going the opposite direction. So I'm just going to go through the whole thing. And now I'm going to take it, rotate it, and now my seams, you can see, are going opposite directions. And that leads us to the pinning. And this is the important part, to bring those seams nested nicely together and have a nice finish with that. So we are going to go ahead, take our first row, flip it on top of our second. We will take our seams and nest them together. You can just feel them kind of lock into place. Take your pin, we're going to go right to left on that seam. I will put a link in the description below to show you how I do this up close, and it uses red thread so you can see it a little bit better. But again, we're going right to left, going down, coming up on the other side of that seam, locking our seams. You can just feel them click into place. We're going to lock it in with that pin, and then as we sew, we'll be able to stitch one stitch over the seam and pull our pin, and then we won't have to sew over our pin and risk breaking our machine, and we still lock those seams in place as we sew. And again, that link that I'll share in the description will also go over how to pin, but also how to pull those pins as you sew. We are nicely pinned. We're just going to sew row 1 and 2 together, and then you would do the same thing for row 3 and 4, and sew the rows together and have your placemats almost done. Now just take your time to watch those seams underneath, and then as we come up to this pin, like I said before, we're going to come over, we're going to one stitch over that seam, then we'll pull our pin, and then we'll keep going. So now those seams are going to stay nested, and we will not run over that pin. Now with the guide on my my 1/4 inch foot, it catches on the pin here, so that's why you see me having to lift it up, because it pushes the pin. I don't want it to do that, but we're still going to come up one stitch over all the way down and finish this seam. All right, and then we're just going to press these seams either direction. It doesn't matter if you go up or down, but we'll finish each row the same way, and then we'll be able to, you see how those come in nicely, we'll be able to add the back and finish up our placemats. I have pieced my placemat completely, just doing the rows just as I showed you with the first one, and then pinning the second. I did it all the same for 3 and 4. And now we're going to add the backing. I have just a plain piece of muslin, and you can use pretty fabric, you can use plain fabric, it doesn't matter. We're just going to use a 12.5 by 18.5 inch piece. We're going to put them right sides together. I'm going to start with marking my start and stop, because we're going to flip these right sides out. I want to make sure that I don't sew this completely closed. I want to have an opening. Now, you can use clips, you can use pins. A clip works just as well as the pin. If you are new to sewing, you can go ahead and pin each corner all the way around so that your fabric doesn't move or shift as you are sewing. You can also don't stretch it when you do this, just kind of make it taut and come in here, find that center and pin this as well. And do that all the way around. For my placemat, I'm going to be sewing with the pieced units on the bottom. My muslin doesn't have a lot of stretch, and the pieced units do, so I want to make sure that the feed dogs are pulling the fabric through evenly. So that is my recommendation if you don't have a lot of stretch on your background or your backing fabric, to sew with the pieced units on the bottom. All right, we're going to go sew around this, leave an opening, and we will come back and flip this out. All right, I'm sewing again with the placemat on the bottom, just because of the fabric that I'm using for the back of my placemat. I'm going to come in where my starting pin is. Again, it doesn't really matter. I just needed to give myself a reminder. Take a stitch here, and then we're going to lock those stitches. Now, if you don't have a locking stitch on your machine, just take a couple stitches back and then go ahead and stitch forward, and it'll be nice and locked. I like to do that before I stitch. I like to lock my stitches at the beginning and at the end, because when we are flipping this right side out, it does pull a little, and that just helps to hold those stitches down. Okay, so we're just going to come here. We're going to stop 1/4 of an inch from the end. Nice thing about the Baby Lock Brilliant, the 1/4 inch foot, it has a little mark right there, so I know that that's where my 1/4 inch stop is. We will rotate, and we're going to go ahead and sew this 1/4 inch all the way around, and then stop, leaving an opening so that we can turn this out. We'll just keep doing that all the way around. Okay, I'm coming to my stopping point, and I'm going to go ahead, lock those stitches. Again, if you don't have a locking stitch, just go ahead, do some back stitching and come forward a little bit, and you have some lock stitches. We will go back to the table. We're going to clip these corners and flip this out, press. We are ready to top stitch. So we have our backing and our patchwork sewn together. We're going to clip the corners, and just do this carefully so you don't accidentally get the stitching. And we will then go ahead and flip this right side out through that opening. And I have found that if I just open this up and then just go for that far corner and start with that one and pull that through, the rest of it comes out pretty easily. I also left myself a pretty good size hole. We'll quick pop the corners out. And then you can use a stylus or a chopstick, or I use that purple thing. I'll put an affiliate link in the description with that. And that just helps us poke these corners out nicely before we press. And then once we press, that's when we can do our top stitching. We want to get the corners out first, get those nice and pointy, and then give it a good press. That nice pressed straight edge is going to give us a really nice finish to our placemat. So I've got the corners pretty good, and now we'll go ahead and press. So I usually start, so here's my opening, and I'm going to start on this end away from that opening, and you're going to take the seam, you're going to just roll it between your fingers and get that seam to just lay nice and flat. It should almost open up a little bit, feel like, and you want to get that done before you come with your iron. We'll go all the way down, just do the whole thing, take your time. This is just fabric. We should be able to manipulate it the way we want to and get it to lay pretty flat before we come with a nice hot iron. Then we're going to come and just press straight down. We'll do this all the way around. And you will, the more you do projects like this, if you're a new sewer or a new quilter, the more projects you do where you are feeling the seam, feeling when you're nesting those seams and feeling those lock into place here, or when you're doing this where you're getting those seams to kind of open up and lay flat like this, the more projects you do, the more you will be able to learn what that feels like. The more confident you'll get with that, but it takes practice. So little projects like this really help to build that feeling with your fingertips and getting to know fabric, getting to know how those seams can lay and how they feel, whether you're pressing or sewing them. It all can be felt, and it all is learned by doing these projects. So I'm just going to continue all the way around this placemat. Okay, and then when I come to the side that has the opening, I'm first going to get the long side straightened out and pressed. That helps get the opening taken care of as well, but we'll first get this long side done. And as I'm working the fabric, I try to just make sure that the top, the patchwork, the top is kind of not really rolled over, because you do want it to be pretty even, but you want the top to be what you see. You don't want to see the background coming to the front here. Okay, so now I'm going to make sure I have this shorter side done, which it's pretty easy because it's a short spot. But I'm going to rotate this, and the first thing I'm going to do is get the backing figured out here. I want this to be pressed nicely at that 1/4 inch. It's going to come, that hot iron. I don't want to get anything else really. I just want this 1/4 inch pressed. Then I'll flip it. And I want to do the same with the pieced seam allowance here, and it wants to be a little bit wider than a 1/4 inch because it's pieced, so there's that seam allowance, so it feels like it wants to have more fabric there, but you get to tell it no. And we're going to make sure it's just going to be a 1/4 inch, and then we'll go ahead, flip it, and press these nicely. And if you pressed where it maybe folded over here, you can see it kind of folded over a little bit more than it maybe should have. We'll just finger press it to where we want it to be, and we're going to come hit it with a hot iron again anyway, and that will take care of that. All right, and now we are ready to go to the machine, and we will top stitch. I'm going to start the same side that my opening is on so that we get that sewn in and locked into place right away. We're going to go top stitch this, and we are done. Okay, we're going to top stitch this placemat. I'm using that beautiful raspberry, and I'm going to start, I want to start on the edge that has my opening, so I make sure I get that closed right away. And because I have a darker thread, I'm going to start on the dark fabric, because that way I can kind of hide where I'm going to take some extra stitches to lock this down. I've lengthened my stitch, so for my Brilliant, my stitch length that I sew on for everything is 2.0. I'm going to lengthen my stitch length to 3.0 for the top stitching, and then I'm going to bring this in. So here's my 1/4 inch mark, my 1/4 inch foot. I'm going to bring this in so that I'm top stitching at about 1/8 inch around the placemat. So I'm going to go ahead, take a stitch here, lock it in place. Again, if you don't have a locking button, go ahead, just take a couple stitches back and then go forward. And we're just going to go ahead, come forward. Now, as you come to this opening, if you've pinned, that's great. If you haven't, you're just going to want to hold this down and just go a little bit at a time to make sure you're getting it caught and closed. Now in this case, I'm going to go a little bit further than that 1/4 inch mark on my foot because we're doing that 1/8 inch. I'll go ahead and turn this. And we're just going to do that all the way around the placemat. All right, we are coming to where I started, and I'm going to actually take a couple of stitches, get this thread all the way. I'm going to take a couple of stitches over where I've already sewn, and then take my locking stitches. And then again, go ahead, if you need to, take a couple of back stitches if you don't have that locking stitch. Take a couple more forward and you are good to go. All right, our placemat is done. I'll meet you back over at the table. And there is our placemat. So I will see you in 2 weeks for the next Snippets with Patterns by Jen. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it. Go make something you love.